Methinks doth protest too much. We have gone to concerts, literally, for generations, and we have definitely been used to some level of disappointment at times whenever it comes to reasons why a band is unable to perform. With metal bands, it could be any one of a number of things, such as equipment failure or a venue that is really not able to handle some of the power capacities that perhaps the band is really putting out. This is something that actually occurred to me a couple of years ago at a Cradle of Filth show that also boasted names such as Knockmistium. But one thing that has been somewhat also frequent whenever it comes to the heavy metal universe is the idea of protest. And ANTIFA was the most recent purveyor of a little bit of fear-mongering this past week. And it happened not only in Oakland, California, but also in various locations across the United States during Marduk's most recent and ongoing United States tour. In Oakland, California, the show was outright canceled before it even had the opportunity to happen, principally because there was word that got out to the Oakland Police Department that this band potentially could cause a lot more chaos. This was something that was on the heels of protests that occurred outside of a Milo rally, and I'm not going to even attempt to state his last name. You know exactly who I'm talking about. The man has literally been everywhere whenever you check social media, as well as the news, for some of his odd but somewhat endearing at times views, if you want to call it that way. It really depends on which side of the coin you really fall upon. This is not to become a political video. But they simply felt that with a high-profile, potentially, Nazi-sympathetic band such as Marduk coming to town on the heels of this event, it's something where safety was going to be an issue. The funny thing about this is that the flag, those people who really raised the flag of concern were getting some very poor information, delivered some very poor information, and as a result, the show got canceled. This is the same group that attempted the same thing in Texas earlier in the week and was run off by the great metalheads in Texas. The difference between Texas and California is simply the fact that the protest occurred in Texas and it was able to be counter-protested and they were able to be really warded off, whereas in Oakland such an opportunity was never even granted. So, what are some of the bad information that was given? Such as the name of the tour, Front Schwein, which is known as, what their information is said, as Frontline Pigs, which is really not all of that bad whenever you think about it. It's really actually just stating the front line, the grunts, something that in any sort of army is sort of an idea that is there. Frontline is basic infantry. It's those that are really going to be in the brunt of the battle, kind of the grunts, the lowlings, the people that are representing your overwhelming force or your larger numbers, whereas your artillery and your other portions of the army are going to represent smaller, more elite squads that have specific tasks. This is more reserved for those who are truly in the front and center of the battle. This information, of course, misinformed a lot of folks into believing that Front Schwein and the idea of frontline pigs was a reference to perhaps Jews, either that or to something very, very evil. Of course, Marduk has been known to use some lyricism as well as some topicality, some themology from World War II, and of course, World War II centers around the Nazis, and that means that anything that has any sort of World War II tie instantaneously makes you a Nazi sympathizer, or somebody who is obsessed with Hitler. It's something that immediately makes you a bad person if you have some sort of, interest in World War II that doesn't just simply imply Pearl Harbor and beyond. Either that, or if you happen to enjoy studying some of the historic significance and perhaps speaking about some of the historic significance that was on the other side. This would be similar as if the band Slayer were to happen to be protested and not allowed to perform because of the song Angel of Death, which is about somebody from that same era in history. It is something that does come up in heavy metal quite a bit, considering this is a dark part of human history, and sometimes heavy metal has to be that voice, it has to be that style of music that sort of reminds the world that that kind of darkness has in fact existed. It is not a world that is simply placed in musical light and remains there. But also there was even more information, and it was based around some of their song titles, either that or based around ideas such as Panzer fucking Marduk. And this, of course, once again revolves around the World War II philosophy. It revolves around the idea of perhaps this band being Nazi sympathizers, perhaps this band is indeed part of that Nazi black metal side that we heard about whenever Graveland was protested late last year up in Canada. Perhaps this is the same thing. It's not. And the bad part about a country such as America, where one of the first and premier ideas is the idea of freedom of speech, it showcases that freedom of speech is on sort of two different coins. One side does have the freedom of protest, and they do have that freedom of speech. But on the other side, wouldn't it be also true that the music of Marduk is subject to that same freedom of speech, that same freedom of expression, as well as the heavy metal fans of Oakland, California, just like the heavy metal fans of Texas, have the right to the freedom of protest against this protest. It's an endless cycle. And really, this is going back to the concept that we are constantly offended by everything, it seems, here in 2017, here in America, here in this world, this digital world that is now just seemingly a digital bitching ground, which is absolutely incredible considering even just a few years ago it seemed like the world was kind of on okay ground, one where there was some concern about that which was going on around us, but at the same time we tended to stick to the dramas that we had within our own communities or within our own friendship circles, as opposed to all trying to become sort of armchair politicians or armchair sociologists, people that are attempting to make a change without having to do any of the legwork, basically just sending information to do it. It's a similar idea to you having a bad experience at a locally owned chain, perhaps for the reason of not fulfilling something based around personal beliefs, either that or based around the way in which a customer is acting. And I'll just turn to the social media and as an attempt to smear campaign that independent place of business to try to ruin or tarnish their image. Does Marduk really give a shit about their image? Is this something that's going to really bother them all that much? No, Marduk simply has the concept. They have the option in order to just never come back to America and leave all of those poor fans starving for a Marduk tour that they would be able to see, and they would not be able to do so. Marduk has that capability, even though America is definitely a big market for this band, something that is very important for them to capitalize on, something where this tour was really meant to do, but was unfortunately unable to do so in many locations based around some of these things. Really, in the end, this is one thing that seems to be coming up more and more as America has entered into 2017. What's amazing about this is that it only seems to be on those things that are truly seen as evil or truly seen as real bearers of taking away different parts of culture that is always seen as a bad thing. No one's going to protest Beyonce's performance at the Grammy Awards based around her little ISIS garb being, anti-Egyptian or pro-Egyptian to the point where she's appropriating that culture for herself. No, of course, that's art. Art, that thing that literally any musician and any painter, anybody who picks up a pen, who picks up a brush or picks up a musical instrument is aiming to attain and create. And based off of that, no, of course, you can't do that. She's Beyonce. She's pregnant. She's gonna have twins. This was a lovely celebration. That confetti represented motherhood. But you know what? The band comes through and just happens to have some lyricism that talks about World War II. And that's a problem. And ANTIFA, of course, wants that to be far, far away from their America. I want to know what you guys think about this, although I think I already know what most of you have to say. But let me know in the comments below. My name is CoverkillerNation, and I'll talk to you next time. Take care.